At 16, she clicked her heels and promised to go home, but Hollywood never let her. Judy Garland, the luminous girl behind Dorothy's blue gingham press, was sold to the world as innocence itself. A bell-clear voice, a smile wide enough to warm a century, a dream that floated over the rainbow. But behind the stage lights was a factory that measured her waist before it measured her worth, that scheduled her sleep and scripted her hunger, that handed out little pills for energy and other pills for silence. She became an industry before she became a woman. Studio handlers timed her days to the minute, polished every note, corrected every angle. When her body refused, chemistry complied. When her spirit faltered, another take, another contract, another promise of glory. Success followed like a marching band, box office triumphs, ovations that shook the rafters, the crown of America's sweetheart secured to a young girl's head with pins that cut the scalp. But fame has a ledger. The entries accumulated. Exhaustion, anxiety, the tightening vice of image control. Love affairs promised rescue and delivered headlines. Comebacks roared and then sputtered. The voice still soared, but it now carried a tremor, a warning tone, the sound of a bird singing in a storm. So we ask the forbidden question the industry prefers to forget. Did Judy Garland destroy herself, or did the machine that built her grind her down? Was her final act an individual tragedy, or the inevitable invoice of a ruthless system that commodified a child and called it entertainment? Tonight, we follow the yellow brick road to its darkest turn, and we count the footsteps the studio system left on Judy's fragile heart.
Judy Garland was not born into Hollywood, but into a world already ruled by performance. On June 10, 1922, in the small town of Grand Rapids, Minnesota, Frances Ethel Gumm entered a family that lived for the stage. Her parents, Frank and Ethel Gumm, managed a theater and performed in vaudeville acts. The spotlight was not a dream to chase, it was the family trade. By the age of 2, Frances was already carried on stage, singing in perfect pitch, her small voice ringing with uncanny maturity. Childhood for Judy was never private. Alongside her 2 older sisters, she performed as part of the Gumm Sisters, traveling from town to town, learning early that applause could pay bills. But within this applause was a shadow. Her father's rumored affairs and the family's financial instability created constant unrest. Her mother, determined to mold her daughters into stars, drove them relentlessly, often sacrificing warmth for ambition. Judy later recalled her mother as the real Wicked Witch, a woman who fed her career before she fed her childhood. The family eventually relocated to California, hoping to break into the burgeoning film industry. Here, the young Frances endured both excitement and isolation. While other children went to school dances and played in backyards, she spent hours in rehearsal halls, voice training, and auditions. Her talent was undeniable, a voice that seemed too grand for such a small body. But this gift came with a cost. Every note sung was another thread binding her to a destiny she had no choice in. The Gumm sisters gained modest recognition, but it was Frances who drew the spotlight. In 1934, the trio renamed themselves the Garland Sisters, and not long after, Frances took the stage name Judy Garland. The reinvention was complete. The little girl from Minnesota was no longer just a child, she was a brand in the making. This early stage of her life forged the paradox that would haunt her forever. She was cherished for her talent, yet deprived of a real childhood. Adored by audiences, yet managed like property. Pushed forward by a mother who measured love in applause. By the time MGM discovered her, Judy Garland was already a veteran of show business, but also a child stripped of the simplicity of being young. Hollywood did not create her hunger for the stage. It simply exploited the vulnerability of a girl who had never known life without it. When Judy Garland signed with Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer at the age of 13, she was no ordinary newcomer. She was a child already weathered by years of vaudeville and small-time performances, yet still unprepared for the brutal machinery of the most powerful studio in Hollywood. MGM saw her as a raw jewel. Her voice could stop time, but her appearance, shorter, plainer, less glamorous than other starlets, was a problem they believed needed fixing. From her very first screen tests, studio executives compared her to Shirley Temple, the nation's reigning child star. Garland lacked Temple's cherubic curls and dazzling smile, but she had something deeper, a haunting vocal quality that could pierce hearts. MGM didn't know how to market her at first, but they knew she was too gifted to let go. The solution, they decided, was to mold her into whatever they required, even if it meant dismantling her natural self. The transformation began cruelly. At just 14, Garland was placed on strict diets to keep her figure appealing. She was told she was overweight, that her face was not pretty enough, that her teeth and nose should be altered. Meals were reduced to coffee, chicken broth, and lettuce. When exhaustion set in, MGM doctors supplied pep pills, amphetamines to keep her awake during long shooting days, and barbiturates to force her to sleep when the work finally ended. A cycle of chemical control was implanted into her life before she even knew the meaning of addiction. Despite this, her undeniable talent shone through. In 1936, she gave a memorable performance of You Made Me Love You at a birthday party for Clark Gable, an impromptu moment that captured the attention of studio heads. Soon after, she landed roles in musical shorts and minor features, gradually winning over audiences. Her big break arrived with the Andy Hardy film series alongside Mickey Rooney. The wholesome teenage musicals became wildly popular, and Judy's chemistry with Rooney made them one of America's favorite on-screen pairs. Yet, behind the cheerful songs and scripted innocence, she was pushed harder, told to laugh louder, sing sweeter, and work longer. Every success deepened her entanglement with a system that saw her less as a teenager and more as an investment. By the late 1930s, Judy Garland was poised on the edge of greatness. MGM had taken the little girl from Minnesota and remade her into a rising star, but at a staggering cost. The world would soon fall in love with Dorothy Gale of The Wizard of Oz. Yet even as her career soared, the personal toll of these early years would carve scars that never healed. By 1939, Judy Garland was only 17 years old, yet her destiny collided with one of the most iconic films in cinematic history, The Wizard of Oz. Cast as Dorothy Gale, the Kansas farm girl who dreamed of a world over the rainbow, Judy embodied innocence and longing with such authenticity that she became the face of an entire generation's imagination. The film was not simply a role, it was the coronation of Judy Garland as Hollywood royalty. The production, however, was grueling. Studio executives kept her on a punishing schedule, restricting her diet and continuing the regimen of amphetamines and barbiturates that had already begun in her early teens. The blue gingham dress and ruby slippers became symbols of magic for audiences, but for Judy, they represented chains. Still, when the cameras rolled, she delivered. Her rendition of Over the Rainbow transcended cinema, becoming an anthem of yearning and resilience. The song won the Academy Award for Best Original Song and later was voted the greatest movie song of all time by the American Film Institute. The film's success launched Garland into stardom. Audiences adored her sincerity, her ability to make even the most fantastical scenes feel emotionally true. She was no glamorous bombshell like Lana Turner or Ava Gardner. She was relatable, vulnerable,
a girl next door whose voice could lift the soul. MGM capitalized on this appeal, pairing her with Mickey Rooney in a string of Andy Hardy films that cemented her image as the wholesome American teenager. Their chemistry lit up screens, and together they became the studio's bankable duo. As the 1940s progressed, Judy's career soared with a string of successful musicals. Babes in Arms, 1939, Strike Up the Band, 1940, Babes on Broadway, 1941. Each film showcased her voice and vivacity, each deepening her bond with the public. By the time she starred in Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, directed by Vincente Minnelli, Judy was no longer just a teen idol, she was a leading lady. The film became a critical and commercial triumph, and Judy's performance of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas entered the canon of holiday classics. Her marriage to Vincente Minnelli in 1945 marked both a personal and professional turning point. He nurtured her artistry, directing her in one of her most acclaimed roles. Together, they had a daughter, Liza Minnelli, who would later carry her mother's torch as an entertainer. For a time, Judy seemed to balance family life with stardom, giving audiences not only unforgettable films, but also the illusion of stability. In 1948, she starred alongside Gene Kelly in Easter Parade, another major hit, followed by Summer Stock, 1950, with Fred Astaire. These films highlighted her versatility. Whether delivering a soulful ballad or dancing with some of the era's greatest performers, Judy Garland was unmatched. Her ability to evoke both joy and heartbreak made her the beating heart of the Hollywood musical. Off-screen, however, the pressures intensified. MGM expected perfection, demanding that she remain the cheerful girl audiences adored. To maintain her schedule, the studio continued its cycle of medication: stimulants to keep her going, sedatives to force rest. The very system that elevated her also eroded her health and self-confidence. Yet, through the 1940s, she never let it show. In public, she was radiant. On stage and screen, she delivered moments of cinematic ecstasy that have endured for decades. Her concerts became legendary. Beyond the silver screen, Garland's live performances revealed her raw emotional power. With every note, she bared her soul, often bringing audiences to tears. She was no longer just Dorothy from Kansas. She was America's songbird, a woman whose voice carried both triumph and tragedy. By the end of the 1940s, Judy Garland stood as one of the most celebrated entertainers in the world. She had conquered film, music, and the hearts of millions. Her image of clasping Toto in a technicolored dreamland remained immortal, while her recordings filled jukeboxes and living rooms across the nation. To her fans, she seemed untouchable, a woman blessed with extraordinary talent and unstoppable success. But fame is often a mirage. Beneath the accolades, Garland's dependence on pills was growing. Her body was tired, her spirit strained. MGM's Golden Girl was beginning to unravel, though the public could not yet see the cracks. For now, the 1940s belonged to Judy Garland. She was the voice of an era, the symbol of Hollywood's golden age. Every smile, every tear, every song left an imprint. She had risen from vaudeville obscurity to international superstardom, and for a fleeting moment, the rainbow seemed within reach. Behind the shimmering curtain of success, Judy Garland's life was unraveling under the weight of the very system that had built her. MGM had created a star whose image embodied innocence and vitality, but sustaining that illusion required control bordering on cruelty. From her teenage years onward, Judy's body and mind were commodities, monitored and manipulated to meet the demands of the studio. The cycle of medication, amphetamines to work, barbiturates to sleep, had by now become an unbreakable chain. What began as studio-mandated assistance grew into a lifelong dependency. Garland herself admitted later that she never learned how to live without pills. They were stitched into her daily existence like costumes in a wardrobe. The drugs took a toll. Her mood swung violently. Exhaustion clung to her, and her body weakened under the constant chemical assault. As her fame grew, so too did the pressure to remain flawless. MGM executives relentlessly criticized her appearance, calling her "fat little Judy," and enforcing diets that bordered on starvation. Even at the height of her career, she battled an internalized belief that she was never good enough. Off-screen, this manifested as insecurity, self-doubt, and a desperate need for love and approval. Her personal life reflected the chaos within. Judy's marriage to Vincente Minnelli, though initially stabilizing, crumbled under the strain of her emotional volatility and his own private struggles. Their union produced her beloved daughter, Liza, but dissolved in divorce. Judy remarried multiple times, 5 marriages in total, each carrying promises of salvation, but ending in conflict and heartbreak. Sid Luft, her third husband, attempted to guide her career with fierce control, but their relationship too became toxic. Financial instability haunted her. Despite her stardom, Judy Garland often found herself drowning in debt. Mismanagement, coupled with her inability to sustain work due to illness and addiction, drained her income. Lavish spending, lawsuits, and the absence of steady studio contracts turned the once bankable star into a woman constantly scrambling for stability. Professionally, her relationship with MGM deteriorated. She grew increasingly unreliable, missing shoots, arriving late, or collapsing from exhaustion. In 1950, MGM terminated her contract after she was replaced in Annie Get Your Gun and Royal Wedding. For a performer who had been raised as a product of the studio, the firing was both devastating and liberating. It marked the end of her golden cage, but also stripped away her safety net. Even as she fought personal demons, her artistry never wavered. In live performances, Judy poured her anguish into her voice, creating concerts that were electrifying precisely because they teetered on the edge of collapse. Audiences sensed the rawness, the fragility behind her powerful notes. To watch Judy Garland sing was to witness a woman bearing her soul, trembling yet transcendent. This paradox, an entertainer whose suffering fueled her genius, only deepened the myth around her. Scandal followed her relentlessly. Newspapers reported her breakdowns, failed marriages, and erratic behavior. Instead of sympathy, Hollywood often treated her as a liability. Friends and colleagues, however, described a woman of immense warmth, wit, and generosity. A woman trapped in a system that devoured its brightest talents. Some insiders even whispered that Judy's downfall was no accident, but the inevitable result of a studio system designed to exploit children and discard them once they broke. By the late 1950s, Garland had become legend and cautionary tale. She was no longer the flawless MGM ingenue, she was a living contradiction. A superstar with a shattered private life, a public idol who carried unbearable scars. The very industry that had celebrated her brilliance was complicit in her destruction, feeding her pills, insecurities, and pressures until she could no longer distinguish herself from the role she had been forced to play. Her story, once the American dream of fame and fortune, had become a nightmare of dependency and despair. And yet, paradoxically, it was in this period of turbulence that Garland gave some of her most unforgettable performances. On stage, she channeled her suffering into art, her voice rising above the wreckage of her life, leaving audiences breathless, often in tears. The tragedy of Judy Garland's conflict was this: the very qualities that made her extraordinary, her vulnerability,
her emotional honesty, her insatiable drive to please, were the same ones that left her exposed to Hollywood's cruelty. She was adored and destroyed in the same breath, a prisoner of applause and a victim of an industry's ruthless hunger.
By the mid-1950s, Judy Garland's once dazzling career had slipped into turbulence. No longer protected by MGM, she found herself vulnerable in a world that had once worshipped her. Without the studio's rigid control, she had freedom, but freedom came with its own demons. Her dependence on pills deepened, her finances collapsed, and her reputation as unreliable hardened into stigma. The final chapters of her life were marked by a relentless battle between her brilliance and her fragility. In 1951, she attempted suicide, overwhelmed by depression and exhaustion. Yet, astonishingly, that same year, she staged a professional rebirth, performing in a series of concerts that reminded the world of her extraordinary gift. None was more triumphant than her 1961 performance at Carnegie Hall, an evening so electrifying it was dubbed the greatest night in show business history. The live recording won multiple Grammys and proved that Garland, when standing before an audience, could still channel magic like no other. But even triumph could not shield her from the storm. Offstage, debts mounted, fueled by years of financial mismanagement and unpaid taxes. She was often forced to take on exhausting tours simply to keep creditors at bay. Her health deteriorated under the strain of constant performances combined with heavy reliance on drugs and alcohol. Relationships remained unstable, husbands came and went, offering temporary comfort but no lasting salvation. By the late 1960s, Garland's physical decline was painfully visible. Her once vibrant face grew gaunt. Her voice, though still powerful, carried the weight of weariness. She became a tragic figure, adored by fans who flocked to her shows, yet pitied by those who saw the shadow of what she had once been. On June 22, 1969, in a modest London home she shared with her fifth husband, Mickey Deans, Judy Garland's battle ended. She was found dead in the bathroom at just 47 years old, the result of an accidental overdose of barbiturates. The coroner ruled it a tragic miscalculation rather than deliberate intent, but the symbolism was chilling. The little girl who had once sung about a rainbow had been consumed by the very system that built her. Her death shocked the world, though for many it felt like an inevitability. Fans mourned not only the loss of a star, but also the brutal reminder of how Hollywood devoured its children. Garland's passing marked the end of an era and cemented her as one of the most tragic icons in entertainment history.
Judy Garland's death at 47 silenced one of the most distinctive voices in entertainment history, but it did not end her story. In fact, her legacy only deepened after her passing. She became more than the girl who walked down the yellow brick road. She became the cautionary symbol of Hollywood's cost, a reminder that behind the glitter of stardom lay machinery that could break the most gifted souls. Her performances remain timeless. The Wizard of Oz continues to enchant new generations, with Over the Rainbow standing as one of the most enduring songs ever recorded. Her live albums, particularly the legendary Carnegie Hall concert, are studied as benchmarks of vocal artistry and emotional authenticity. Few performers have been able to merge technical brilliance with such raw vulnerability, and it is this combination that keeps Garland's art alive decades later. She also left behind a profound cultural influence. Judy became an icon not only of American cinema, but also of resilience in the face of despair. For the LGBTQ+ community, she emerged as a symbol of strength and survival. her struggles and defiance resonating deeply with those who lived on society's margins. The phrase, "friend of Dorothy," became coded language, linking her character in The Wizard of Oz to an entire movement's fight for identity. Her daughter, Liza Minnelli, carried forward her torch, achieving her own fame and ensuring Judy's bloodline remained woven into show business. Yet even as Liza rose, Judy's shadow loomed, both as inspiration and warning. Today, Judy Garland is remembered as both legend and tragedy, a woman whose golden voice gave joy to millions and whose broken life exposed the darker truths of fame. She will forever be Dorothy, forever the voice over the rainbow, and forever the star who taught the world that magic can also come at a devastating price.
Judy Garland's life is both a masterpiece and a warning. She gave us Dorothy, she gave us Over the Rainbow, and she gave us the raw truth of what it means to burn brightly in a world that never lets the flame rest. Her story forces us to ask how many more stars have been shaped, controlled, and consumed by the same ruthless system. If Judy's journey has moved you, if her songs still echo in your memory, then help us keep her legacy alive. Share your thoughts below. Do you see her as a victim of Hollywood's cruelty, or as an icon who transformed pain into unforgettable art? Subscribe to Beyond the Red Carpet for more untold stories, hidden scandals, and secrets buried deep in Hollywood's golden age. Because sometimes, the real drama begins when the cameras stop rolling.